Hello, everybody. Good morning. Roger Durling, Executive Director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and welcome to the producers panel. We actually have an extraordinary group of producers. They are the eight nominated films for this year's Oscars. With us, we'll have Christina O, producer of Minari, Sion Chaffin, producer of Mank, Dan Janvey, producer of Nomadland, David Parfit, producer of The Father, Josie McNamara, producer of Promising Young Woman, Mark Platt, producer of The Trial, The Chicago Seven, Sasha Ben Harosh, producer of Sound of Metal, and Sasha King, producer of Judas and the Black Messiah. Before we start, I need to thank. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Shaka King. Um, Before we start, I would like to thank the sponsor of the film festival, UGG, and the board of directors of the film festival. Without further ado, and I'm sorry for Shaka messing up your name, uh, I introduce you to the moderator of today's panel, Glenn Whipp, the entertainment columnist for the Los Angeles Times. Take it away, Glenn.
All right, man. I didn't think it would be ever any stranger than the year was like 2 years ago when a rainstorm washed out the 101 and there was only like two producers managed to show up in Santa Barbara. That was a strange year, but these boxes, but it's been a weird year. So why should this producers panel be any different, right? Um, I'm going to go. We'll talk about each of you guys, your films for just a little bit, ask some general questions, and then we'll be on our way. Um, David, I'm gonna start with you. Um, what's it like to have a movie nominated for Best Picture and hardly anyone has been able to see it? I mean, The
It
Father
is
is
the
just like, yeah,
yeah, it is the craziest thing. I mean, we've been open in the States for the last 4 weeks, but in a fairly limited way, as I understand it, with sort of 25% capacity in the theatres, and they've gone to premium video on demand in the last week, and we'll see what that does. But we're not open in the UK, so nobody knows anything about it here. So it's very strange. It's really strange.
it's like, yeah, what is this movie, The Father, and what's it about? And I mean, when it was nominated, when the Best Picture nominations were announced, I think it was just arriving or about to arrive in theaters, right? In that
Yeah,
limited
that's right.
capacity. Yeah.
Yeah, because we've had date. We shot this summer 19, and we just about got it ready for Sundance at the beginning of last year, and then lockdown. So we spent the time up to around sort of July, August, trying to finish it in lockdown in London and Paris, which was tricky. And then had all of these dates. So we were going to be released in September, then October, then November, and onwards. So it has been incredibly odd.
Yeah.
Um,
And what's also odd is that, I mean, you mentioned Sundance. It's at Sundance in 2020, which two other films were as well nominated this year. And that has to feel
yeah.
like it was just another time. I mean, just like eons ago.
Well, I mean, we've been waiting to see. Were we the super spreaders there in all of those sort of steamy parties? You think about that now, being close to people without masks. What was that? It was very uh, free, and we had no idea of what was to come.
Yeah, yeah. Now that you mention it, I do remember stories coming out in like February, March of 2020 was Sundance a super spreader event. Although I don't even know that super spreader event was a term
Was
in
a
our
thing.
lexicon. yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah,
not
yeah,
then. No, not then.
yeah.
And then, of course, we came back to the UK from that, and we produced theatre as well. So we were just in rehearsals for a new play as all of this hit. So obviously, this whole last year or so has been pretty devastating in the UK. Although I do now have a socially distanced dinner party happening in the cold in the garden as we speak, and I've just broken away from that. So cheers.
That's nice. I'm glad to hear somebody's
It's the
enjoying
evening.
themselves
It's
right
the
now. Um, and I guess I would imagine that, I mean, a, with The Father, a challenge, even if you have a cast with two Oscar winners, Anthony Hopkins, Olivia Colman, just getting financing for a movie about dementia could not have been easy, right?
No, it was quite tough. I mean, so this project was developed in France by Philippe Carpentier.
Maybe that party's just a little out of control there in England. Um, I'm going to ask you, Shaka, because you weren't there at Sundance 2021. But
I was
Judas
not
and the
there.
Black Messiah premiered at Sundance this year. What was that? What has been the experience of your movie premiering at a virtual festival and then landing on HBO Max?
Yeah, your question about, what was it like basically to, have my premiere happen virtually? Strange, as has been just this entire process of, I haven't seen the movie with strangers yet. Um, and so, you know, I know that the movie, um, is reverberating among, a good portion of people who've seen it. But because I'm also not on social media, uh, it's just I get a text here, I get a call here, I read some of the press coverage, but really I've been completely deprived of the experience of you know seeing how the film connects with audiences in a real way. So it's strange. It's very bizarre.
That's bizarre and just kind of sad. It's sad too, um, because this is a movie that you would want to have that connection. Like I remember talking to Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield about how this is a film that you want to see with an audience, just to be able to feel each other, you know. Um, and then on the other hand, they were saying the one good thing about it was that a lot more people are going to know about Fred Hampton.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, and I think also it's a movie that it can be a bit dense. So, it's good that people, when it was on HBO Max, were able to watch it two, three times, and get something different from it, with each viewing. So there were some upsides, but I think just selfishly, I miss out on the fact that we didn't have a communal theater going experience.
Have you thought about popping into a theater to see it?
Oh yeah, I'm intending to next week. You know, I just have I've been busy, but I'm gonna pop in. I saw it in Jersey with a group of college friends, and not nearly the same. But I'm gonna pop in now that it's in New York. Um, you know, I've heard that. I've had people say, yeah, I went and I was the only person in the theater. So I'm hoping that the instance I do that, I don't I don't walk in and I'm by myself. Um,
That would
but
that would just be so
but
that would just be so in keeping with the year, though. That would just be
it'd be
so in
hilarious. I
keeping
think
with the
I'd
experience.
laugh. I would laugh. I would laugh honestly.
Yeah.
But I did have a friend book a ticket last night. She said it was sold out. She said it's a
Oh,
25 capacity, probably 25% capacity, but it's sold out. So even if there were like 7 people in there, that would be something for me.
I mean, that's nice because I looked up showtimes for the film this morning, just kind of curious about how wide it was playing here in LA. I mean, it's around, and it looks like it's doing well. I'd
That's
love to
great
see
to
it in
hear.
a
That's
theater.
great to hear.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Christina, you were at Sundance 2020. I saw you kind of nodding in recognition at the idea of a super spreader event. Like, okay, yeah, wow, that was. But what? How far ago? How long ago does that seem? That festival with Minotti premiering?
It seems like yesterday and also ages and ages ago.
Mm,
Um, I
that's
guess a lot
time
has
these
happened.
days, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot has happened in that, or a lot and nothing has happened in that year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that was another. I was talking to. That was another really emotional premiere. Um, I did a piece with Stephen Yun and Lee Isaac Chung, and they had their fathers there, and everybody was crying. And the reason being that the fathers felt like the sons finally kind of understood them by they watched the movie and they felt understood. Is that an experience that you've felt and heard about from people watching Minotti?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was kind of an like a very, very memorable screening. It was the first time we screened it with a big audience. All of our parents were there. My parents, Stevens, Isaac's. We were all super nervous because the majority of them hadn't seen it yet, and this was a film that I don't want to say we made it for them, but it was a huge part of why we wanted to do it, and it's a huge part of our story. And also examining like the lives of our parents is always like a daunting thing. So I have this memory of like hoping that I wouldn't be sat next to my parents, and of course, like I get to my seat and I'm right next to my mom the whole movie, and just like cannot. I'm just like freaking out the whole time. Um, and then hearing and watching it, like Shaka, I hope you get to experience it with a room full of people someday, like safely, of course. But it is an incredible experience to be in an audience of people and like sitting there, like hearing and feeling them respond to something. But yeah, it was a little daunting because I do think um, a lot of people say that in watching the film they finally felt seen, whether it's through through Alan's character of David or the parents' character, and also a lot of people talk about how it's helped bridge their own sort of gap between uh, parents and children, especially children of immigrants like myself who grew up, and there's just a natural divide that occurs as you get older. It's sort of a cultural thing that happens between your parents and yourself because like you stop speaking the same language, so there's not
Mhm.
it's like harder to convey like deep emotional things with them. So I think for this was sort of a love letter for us to kind of be like, I think we get it. Did we get it? And
Yeah.
our parents are super proud, and it's been a wild ride.
Well, you say you were feeling the audience at that premiere. Were you able to? But what were you're sitting right next to your mom? So what vibes were coming off of her?
Um, I honestly like may have blacked out during that
Mm.
time. It was so emotional. Like by the end of the film, I was like I couldn't even process like anything. And it was like nice though to have moments where you really connect with an audience where they're laughing at bits you never thought they would laugh at, or people were really moved. Um, and I definitely had several moments where my mom like grabbed my arm, and I was just like dying inside a little. But
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
it was very sweet, and I'm so grateful that I was able to kind of share that experience with them.
Josie, your movie, Pretty Young Woman, um, was at Sundance as well. That's the third film that was at Sundance 2020. But I want to hear about a screening that I read about. It was a test screening in Burbank. This is another thing. This is another movie that, like, I feel like we're really missing out on the audience experience because Pretty Young Woman would just be so great to see with like a crowded theater. But tell me about this test screening in Burbank where like people did have a bit of a reaction.
Yeah, well, obviously it was our first test screening of the movie, and it was obviously with the studio focus there, and we were all quite apprehensive to see what the reaction was, and yeah, we had, as expected, we had an argument break out between two of the people in the screening because of one of the scenes in the movie. They both had a different reaction to the movie and decided to have an argument in the middle of it. One of them got up and walked out. So it was strange, but it was also it was kind of affirming that the movie was doing what we wanted it to do, and was a conversation starter, and people were having a dialogue about the movie. So it was definitely it was nerve wracking at the end, kind of turning to the team at Focus and seeing what their reaction was, and luckily it was kind of they were as excited as we were by the reaction. So it was yeah, it was strange, but it was fun.
But yeah, you want this movie to be a conversation starter. Maybe not conversations like loud conversations inside the theater while the movie's playing, but maybe afterwards and stuff. But you kind of knew by that screening that okay, we're on the right track here.
Yeah, definitely. I think yeah, it was just reassuring to see that the moments that we thought would start, conversation were hitting the mark, and then we were very lucky to have to be able to show the movie at Sundance and have that audience experience, obviously before everything shut down. So yeah, it was great to be able to see it with an actual audience before everything changed.
And how many shooting days did you have for this film?
We 23. We did shot it
That's
in
what
Los Angeles.
I read 23 and that Emerald Fennell, sorry, um, third trimester pregnancy. So like, and from, I mean, 23 days to shoot this movie just seems a bit broad. Um,
Yeah, well, I mean, it
it's
was.
just,
Yeah, I mean, credit to Emerald. She had such a specific vision for the movie, and it was so clear that during our prep period, there was a very clear direction that the movie needed to go in. So for every HOD, they had a very clear sense of what they needed to do. So even though it was a tight schedule, we knew we could achieve it because Emerald knew exactly what she wanted to do, and even though the days were tight, it was. It never felt like we were rushing or finding time because it's yeah, she had such a clear vision of what she wanted to do.
good, good. Um, Sasha Ben Harosh. A movie like Sound of Metal. So many years that Darius Martyr spent um, thinking about this movie. 4 or 5 years writing it, trying to figure it out. Um,
More than that.
I remember talking to him, and it's it's like the perfect after all that long journey, landing in the middle of this pandemic. This movie about kind of stillness and appreciating the moment, appreciating your circumstances, no matter what they are. Um, it's such a weird thing in the universe how movies land and when they land. There's no question in that. It was just it was just what I was feeling when I saw the movie. And I mean, how long have you been on the film?
For now, 6 years now.
Yeah,
6 years, 3 years before we started principal photography. yeah, but I mean, I think every movies you need an alignment on a lot of things. You know, it's several miracles to make a movie happen. The prep, production, and post. Those are like literally three miracles. So I think the release was a fourth one to be able to, because we shot in 2018. The movie, the release dragged for several reasons, and just landed in the right moment. I think November 2020 was a great timing to release, and then it felt, because we're now reopening in theaters, that we kind of beat that pandemic, kind of. So it's exciting, but it is uh, it is definitely good to see that people are watching it after being isolated for a whole year. It definitely, I think they are more sensitive to Ruben's journey for sure.
Have you heard that from? I mean, we're talking about kind of uh, the disappointment of lack of feedback or the challenge in getting feedback. Have you heard from people um, about that experience ongoing on Ruben's journey? And
And the pandemic, yeah, we did hear it quite a bunch. I think, well, the media journalists did a parallel. I think it's pretty obvious. I think, I felt like that before the pandemic. Trying to find your own balance within yourself, being forced to do that because you don't have any way to find. I mean, any exterior way to um, solve your problem. So you look within yourself, and I think that's also what drawn me to the project, is that famous quote from Joe saying that the kingdom of God is within yourself. It's not a very religious line. It's more of a, not even, I don't even think it's spiritual. It's a psychological line about, you know, looking within yourself. But it's true again. The pandemic helped having that conversation, and more people, I feel, are concerned by that, or are actually being aware that they are concerned by that. Yeah,
yeah,
but
I
we
feel
got
like
lucky
Paul
because
Race.
we premiered with an audience, so I was able to see the film with strangers and see reactions, and it was already the case when we premiered before the pandemic that people felt, a certain amount of people felt that they were going through that as well, in a very different
Mm,
way. But
hmm.
yeah,
Right, right. Yeah, I feel like Paul Racy saying that line about the kingdom of God. I mean, Paul Racy's just like, I would go on and watch Sound of Metal if I'm ever feeling like anxious about the world. Paul Racy can kind of talk me through it, just watching that scene.
yeah,
Great
he's
performance.
a unique character, and we were desperate to cast this role, and it was very very hard, and we cast him very late in the process, and it was the last tape we looked at, and we just fell in love with his tape. He was crying in the tape. It was very emotional. We knew that we had to dial down that emotion, but it was such a gift. He's a giver, and so it was, yeah, he's a gift to our film for sure,
Mm.
for sure.
Mark Platt, another movie, long journey to the screen, Trial of the Chicago Seven. Aaron Sorkin wrote this a long time ago for Steven Spielberg to direct. Um, that was 13 years ago. How many years have you been on this movie?
I've only come aboard in the last three. Um,
Okay.
uh, 13 years ago, Aaron wrote it for Steven. Then a couple other directors came aboard, and then the script got put away. And then two things happened. One was Aaron directed his first film, Molly's Game, and the politics in our country changed in 2016 with the election of Donald Trump. Those events conspired, certainly in Steven's mind, to think maybe we ought to revisit this story and maybe Aaron ought to direct it. And that's when I came into it.
And again, a movie that we're talking about movies that arrive at a particular time. Um, a movie about protest, um, and they turn violent. And whose narrative do you believe? You know, um, that watching that movie in late 2020 had a different weight to it, didn't it?
Oh, for sure. I mean, what's ironic or sad or however you want to look at it is that we made that movie 2019, but it's a movie that's about events in 1968 and 1969. And if you watch it in 2021, you come to the realization that the narrative in our country hasn't changed very much. The events of the Chicago 7 trial and the film itself were made prior to the killing of George Floyd, uh, prior to the insurrectional January 6th, prior to the Black Lives Matter movement, and uh, at a time when truth uh, is a yearn for commodity in our society and our politics, and so it's a story that is very true to its time period and its folks. But what happened there happens today. Um, the nature of the relationship between police and protest, the imperative for us to raise our voices in protest on behalf of democracy, um, which we're now living out all over again, um, uh, with voting rights acts that are passing across the country. So as much as we all change and we can look at such a great group of producers here today and such a interesting and different subject matters and characters and the authenticity of the voices and look and say, gosh, we've come so far. And yet in so many ways we have not. I think Chicago 7
Mm.
suggests that.
Mm. Your movie's been on Netflix for a few months. Well, again, I have no idea about time, but it's been a few months now. Cian, your movie Mank premiered on Netflix, I believe in December. I'm just doing a little trip down memory lane now myself. You had the opportunity with David Fincher, Netflix asking after Mindhunter, asking David Fincher, was there anything that you always wanted to make but never had the chance? What what is so? And Mank was this movie that um, was written by David's father, Jack. What's it like producing this movie that's such a personal film um, in so many? You get the green light. Is it more pressure?
I think it is in the sense that probably everyone feels here that we have, uh, in a way, we're all asking, will you make our film? As opposed to, I'm sure there's, we can refer to other scripts and say, oh, they'll make that. It has Lycra in it or a superhero or whatever. So I feel that you first come to it and you feel extremely grateful that you are getting that chance to do it. I'm super pragmatic, and but it was an emotional film. I think particularly for Fincher, it was. Though I don't think you'd ever notice it with him. I think the core crew who know him so well, we all had our little secret conversations about this is a rough one for him because he didn't want to fuck it up. Having had it in his head for 27 years, and with Fincher, that's not a really good thing, in my opinion. It's like on Gone Girl, we did it 3 days later. We got the script, and all of a sudden we're producing it. Some of the best things I've seen him do in music videos, we're doing them within 3 days of hearing the song. So 27 years for the person who has to have it in their brain and spew it out, I think is tough. And what all you can do is really try to create that envelope where they feel comfortable and just support it. And I think for all of us on the crew, we could see that uh, it was a complicated thing to direct. It was the way he was interweaving the stories and jumping back and forth in time, and he didn't want to mess up. So we were just trying to support him in every single way. he has a really great, we have a really great crew that, the Dolly Grip understands story probably better than most people. And, we have just these kind of crazy, great thinkers who help in every way.
So you have to you're talking 27 years, um, such a personal piece, and yeah, just providing that support to the the, the filmmaking support, but also just on a subconscious level, more just kind of an emotional understanding too.
Well, when you're given money to do something that not everyone, you've already been turned down several times over the years, I think that you feel a great obligation to deliver something that is right for their library. For us, the beauty of Netflix is that I think they really do love film. They love it, because who else would allow the things? This would never have gotten made with the six families. So we're also doing a kind of a film lover, film essay project that it just talks about the love of film, and who would support that? So it's you feel an obligation, I think, to deliver in some kind of way that, whether it's and I don't mean box office wise, I don't mean that. I mean it in the sense that they're happy with it as well.
Yeah, yeah. Dan the man, you're last man standing here, last person standing here. Yeah, another movie, Nomadland, that kind of lands at an interesting time in 2020. It's about a spiritual journey, about finding community, also about hitting the road when most of us are stuck at home. What was that like to put that out? It's the only movie I saw this year outside my living room, by the way. I saw it at a drive-in at the Rose Bowl. So that
Oh
always have a
yeah,
special
with
place in my heart.
yeah, as Los Angeles burned around us.
Oh,
That was yeah. It's funny you bring that. Well, I just want to say, but before that, I with the exception of The Father, I've actually seen all of your movies in theaters. So I want to say that I consider myself very lucky for that. And my apologies to The Father. I'll now seek it out in New Jersey. But Shaka, I went to Jersey to see your movie, and I saw Promising at Sundance. Same with Minari. I was at your premiere in Toronto, Sasha, and then for Mark and Cien, with Trial of Chicago 7, I drove to Connecticut to see it at a Bowtie Cinema. And with Mank, I went opening weekend to Hoboken. And Shaka, with you saying that you don't want the theater to be empty, I've had the opposite experience where I was so happy these theaters were empty. And I went to see Nomadland in theaters, I think 2 weeks ago, and with my girlfriend and her mom, and we were the only three people there. I was like, this is great. So, but it's really interesting about what the theatrical experience is like right now. For me, it's kind of a dream. I love going to empty theaters. I actually find that to be like a remarkably fulfilling experience. Glenn, that has nothing to do with your question. Yeah, we premiered in the Rose Bowl.
You're just saying you don't like people is basically what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The producer of Nomad. Yeah, very Fern-like of me, I suppose. But yeah, we premiered at the Rose Bowl, and we had a lot of great cooperation between those fall festivals to kind of come together and say let's put this out in a unique way. And that was a great evening. That was my first drive-through premiere I'd ever been to, and it's a really nice thing hearing people express their affection through honking horns. It's an unusual way to feel something. And then but it was weird. It's like you had a combination of nomads there with their rigs, and then a lot of Los Angeles people with their Teslas having no idea how to turn off their lights, which I assume they then figured out in subsequent events. So I don't know. Everything feels everything in COVID both feels like super weird and also kind of intuitive, you know, like especially in retrospect, like sure, why not show a movie this way? And I think there's so much crazy conversations happening above all of our pay grades on this about theatrical windows and streaming and all that crap. And I think that the optionality for people and people who love movies is also kind of a beautiful thing. And we saw a level of flexibility with movie culture that I don't think had ever happened before in history. And so I'm hoping that sense of adventure and weirdness and finding community, finding solitude will continue, you know, with movie going. Um, yeah, yeah. That has nothing to do with no. I should talk about Nomadland. Ask me a Nomadland question. Yeah, maybe it does have something to do with Nomadland. Yeah,
It does. It does. It does. But yeah, it's kind of funny. What a weird experience that was, where people are honking their horns and like turning their headlights on, off and on, um, to show. That's the feedback. That's the feedback of 2020 in a watching a movie. You know, we were all
yeah,
isolated in our vehicles, windows rolled up, um, like you say, ash falling around us because it was 2020, and
yeah. The
how else
fires. Yeah.
would it? Yeah, yeah. Um, have any of you, Shaka? You say you're going to go next week. Doesn't sound like you've been. Have you been to any movies at all um, in a theater?
Yeah, I did. I saw Tenet in the theater. Um,
Hmm,
I saw uh, our film, in the theater with some friends
New Jersey.
in New Jersey. Did I see anything else in theaters? I don't think I did. I don't think I did.
How
It
many?
was those two.
How many
Yes,
people
no.
saw Tenet? Tenet in a movie theater. How many of Christina? You can raise your hand like proud, like pride.
No, I saw
I
I
Tenet,
mean,
but
think
I
was
didn't
that
see
the
it.
first? Was that the
I
first
was just,
one?
I was going to say in
Was that the
London,
movie that kind of
and
reopened theaters?
yeah, it was, and
Yes.
it's in fact I think just about the only film that we've had in London. So I saw it in that very brief window before we locked down again. But now I'm desperate to get out and be with other people in a theatre.
The tenant in theaters was like the funniest conversations I've had about the degree to which I like movie going. Will I risk my life to see a Chris Nolan movie in theaters? And I was like, all right, well, sure.
Yeah, that was a really conversation.
But I remember with Mank, I was like, I'm not missing the. I'm not seeing a David Fincher movie on anything other than a theater. And
I haven't
you
seen
know,
it
it's
on a
like movies.
screen. That's
Oh my
so
god,
funny to me.
check it out.
I did get
But
to.
what about? But
We actually did we did a film print. We ran a film print, which is completely contrary. If you know anything about Fincher, about us and digital, we have a 3 film prints, and so I got to see some of the. I wanted to see the tests of different stock we were testing. I was so shocked. I was like, "Oh my god, I need to see this movie on a big screen because I haven't been allowed in the DI suite. You know, it's too crowded and all that stuff." So maybe there's a silver lining in COVID in that we all realize we really love the big screen still, and that experience, and not just us, I mean the community the audience. I think we might find that. I have a feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's been a lot of alarmist talk about death of movie going, but you can look at it in that way, Cian, where you're talking people are now hungry, for collective experiences. I mean, certainly COVID is expedited the conversation about streaming. Um, and it sounds like you guys are all like, well, I mean, it gives the audience more options. Where do you come down on streaming and um, theatrical windows and all this talk. I mean, do you think that what we've seen in the last year is going to change people's habits in movie going?
I think it might change the kinds of movies that are put into theaters for people to come see. There's no denying that the virtue of streaming is that many more voices can probably be heard and more stories can be told. And the more stories told and the more opportunities given to different individuals, the better it is for all of us, both as moviegoers and consumers of stories and also those who create content. Um, but at the same time, I think the ability to niche market smaller movies and to reach out and streaming may suggest that it's a bit harder from an economic standpoint to put those movies out in theaters. And nobody knows exactly what people's behavior will be a year from now coming out of the pandemic. You know, I think older people, I myself was afraid to go into a movie theater and I missed it greatly. And I didn't realize how much I missed it until I went to Universal about 4 weeks ago to watch a director's cut on the big screen. And to your point that was said earlier, it was like, what a beautiful art form cinema is when it's played on the big screen and you feel these motions of these people and the camera brings you into a world and the aesthetic and it was like seeing something for the first time. So I do think that there will be theatrical business. I do think we crave collective experience. And to Shaka's point earlier, I don't think it's selfish even for your own film. I miss being in a theater with people, just hearing laughter or hearing somebody scared or watching, hearing the silence of an audience when you're compelled into a drama. I miss that greatly. But I do think we can't deny how fast the streaming business has exploded. One streamer had a couple million subscribers a year ago, and they're well over 100 million today, being Disney Plus. So it's happening, and so I do think that the kinds of movies that the cost of which will demand they be in the theaters and hopefully create those global experiences. I think they will still be there. But I do wonder if the choices will be a little bit more bifurcated.
There was one
Sure, but what's wrong
thing
with
that.
that? Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was going to say there was one thing that I was very scared because on The Father we had a first time director, and I wanted him to experience the film with an audience outside Sundance, and said, how are we going to we had no preview process, so how are we going to work this out? And he said, well, of course it was a play, so I know how people respond to those lines. So you were. Thank God for that, really, because otherwise I think we'd have been in some trouble. But just on the streaming thing, isn't it nice that there's the possibility now of more flexible windows? I think I want obviously to have films in cinemas and that communal experience, but lovely to think that perhaps we won't be held back for months after our initial release.
Yeah.
To piggyback off of what Mark said in terms of this change affecting what movies play theatrically and what don't, and I think the illusion being that the bigger movies, the ones that cost more, are going to be the ones that make theaters, and the smaller ones, many of our films, will be the ones that end up going the streaming route. I'm curious to see if more niche theatrical experiences like Metrograph in New York City, if we'll start to see smaller independent chains opening to cater to those smaller movies that people still want to go see in theaters. That'll be interesting to see if that happens. I hope it does.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you think that younger generation is going to be going to those movies? That's what I wonder about, Shaka. It's like, okay, everybody everybody my age for sure, but I wonder about my kids. Like, I try to teach them, but
Right.
are they going to be supporting that kind of theatrical experience? That's what I wonder about.
Well, I mean, you figure people are still going to take their kids to the movie theater just to get them out of the house. And so if kids grow up going to movies from, childhood, then you can assume that, in the, adolescence, they'll continue to, in terms of where their tastes lie, that's like, I don't know, that's, you know, good movies were cool to watch when I was a teenager. Um, that was the culture, especially like growing up in New York, So it's all a matter of whether it'll be cool to watch good movies, when these kids are coming of age or in the next, 5 years. And that's like marketing, really. It's really just marketing towards them and catering to them so that they watch something, they watch a trailer and they're like, oh, I really want to see this. And then it'll be a matter of, well, can I watch it on my phone right now or watch it on the streaming service right now? Or is it exclusively only available to see in a theater, for the next 2 weeks? We'll see, like I saw a trailer for that movie Zola that's coming out that A24 is releasing this year. And that's like, I think definitely catered. That's primarily, I think, directed towards a younger audience. So it'll be interesting to see if young folks go see that in theaters or if, I don't know even what their plan for releasing it is, if they're going to do a streaming release alongside or soon after. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I feel like A24 is the studio that is marketing to younger audiences really well in terms of an indie studio. I'm thinking about like Hereditary, Midsummer. Those are movies my kids have wanted to go see in a theater because of just the collective freak out of, there's nothing like it. Being surrounded by people uncomfortable, Yeah. And I mean, I just doing this, having this conversation with you all. I mean, yeah, I want to see all these movies on a big screen for the filmmaking. And then I've been thinking about each of the films themselves and what would have been that audience, that collective experience, be it tears, outrage, whatever, you know. Um, someday, hopefully see them in a theater. What about, okay, so you guys are producers, Shaka, director as well. This is a question I usually ask, like actors get all the glory, directors, this, Shaka, get all the credit, right? Or the blame, maybe, I don't know. What do producers get? What's the best part of your job? Is that collective silence? There is no good part.
I think it maybe varies a little bit, but I think it's the best part of producing is it's a little different for each journey, but it can be the joy of seeing a story you felt you wanted to tell, being told, and hopefully being told in a very satisfying, artistic, accessible way. It could be the joy of facilitating, as a producer, a filmmaker or a writer's or even an actor's vision and dream of something and a story that you want to help facilitate and navigate for them to get made, and that's equally as satisfying on their behalf. So it's and lastly, I think it's different for everyone, but I have a feeling you all feel the same way, which is I often measure the success of a film on the journey that it took to get there, because of course you want the result to be fantastic. You want to get nominations or box office when there was box office. So subscribers to watch and people to be moved by it, et cetera. But it's such a long journey, mostly, to make a movie, and it's a lot of hard work. And the joy in the process and the journey, if it is joyful, is also of great satisfaction, where one can often measure success as a producer.
You said it all.
Yeah,
I can't beat that.
Supporting a vision is definitely.
I would add to that the camaraderie that most people have jobs that are complicated or hard, and I think we're very fortunate that we get to set a target and meet it. You feel like you have purpose and you accomplish it. And it's, I always make a joke that if anyone's talking to me, it's not a compliment. There's a problem. They're complaining or there's a problem. The producer's role is problem solving. But the camaraderie you have with the team that's making it, since it's not a singular art, except it does, the poor directors, I'm a big, like, just back the director, because they do get the blame, And then when it's time for credit, everyone gets the credit if it's any good. And if it's not, then they all point to the director. But I love that part of it where we really do get behind something, whoever is really leading that creatively. And it's quite satisfying.
Kind of what Mark said, just rocking it. I think is really, really awesome. I think being there for somebody and giving them the space to create something is the most fulfilling.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, Christina, with Isaac, I mean, this was like his. He was like living the story of the main character of Soul, the Pixar movie, where he was about to like take a full-time teaching gig and not, yeah, this filmmaking's been okay, but I don't know if I can, pursue this and make a living at it. So to be able to support him and get his vision out there, and now it's, he's an Oscar-nominated director. That's an amazing journey.
Yeah, it was probably one of the most. That morning was probably a very full of graciousness. It was an incredible experience. I think he did take a full-time teaching job, and he kind of like wrote this as like a last. Like, I'm gonna give this one last shot. I don't think anything will happen to it, but I will have written it down, and maybe my kid can read it someday. Because it did come from a place of his connection to his own child, and so that was kind of that. He was, in speaking to him, he was kind of ready to be like, all right, I've accepted that maybe this isn't this. There's no space for me to do this in my life, and being able to give him that space was, again, like, I mean, I met him and we premiered in less than a year. I hadn't even known him for a year. And so that to me was just like probably one of the most amazing experiences I'll ever go through in my life. I don't know if I'll be able to replicate that, and I would never want to try. That's a singular special moment, and it was like magic, and being a part of that was so incredibly like awesome.
That's beautiful. Typically we're in a theater, typically inside this theater, and I don't know, typically inside this theater there are students from around the country who are at the festival, and what for these students, what advice, if there's any aspiring producers in the audience watching this, what advice would you give to anyone aspiring for your job?
Never lie.
I might say, never lie. That's good.
Never lie. Okay.
I think I don't know about everyone else, but certainly in the 30 years that I've been doing this, things have changed a huge amount. And when I was coming in, it was one of the most regular calls I got was, "Can I have your short ends?" And now that, sorry, Mark, I know you probably got the same, but now that that's all changed, I would just say get out there and shoot it, because you can now in a way that we really couldn't. And I had this conversation with someone quite recently. Isn't it incredible that you can go out with your phone and shoot a short or a feature? while we were all crawling around just looking for the facility to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoever
I think it's a one.
whoever asked to get your short ends, I would have offered a job on the spot. That's a filmmaker. Like that's the right question more than how the hell do I become a producer? Because if you're asking that question, it's not you're not going to find the answer. Yeah. The I really like that he asked for the short end. But I would say find your tribe and don't rely on anyone outside of your tribe. And if you think someone else is going to get something done for you, they're not. And I don't know, that's an independent film mindset, but I imagine it also applies to like Fincher World, and I imagine it scales. Like, find your family, find the people who you want to make stuff with, and stick with them. With Nomadland, I was super lucky to join a tribe. So, because Molly, the producer, and Josh, the cinematographer, they had made 2 films prior together. There were a lot of us new to that. So I think it also, like the corollary to find your tribe is keep your tribe open to new people. Shaka, I imagine that was true for you, like coming from Newlyweds to Judas, like imagine your tribe's like constantly expanding, So that's what I would say.
Yeah,
Is like stick
I
with
brought folks along. I brought folks with me because you need. I brought my costume designer with me. I brought my editor with me. Um, I brought a friend who has made music on other movies I've done. I brought him on board to do some composition. Um, so yeah, and I also made a lot of new tribe members as well. You know, and I think a piece of advice I'd give as a director producer who's worked with other producers and other director producers and Ryan is allow your producer to produce in the sense of I think a lesson that it took me the whole shoot to learn was just how really as a director you can get very myopic about things, and the job of your producer is to have a greater sense of the entire process, including the release, which is something that they need to be keeping in mind during production. And there were certain moves that my producers kind of pushed me to make that I was hesitant to, that I was reluctant to, that they knew would pay off down the line because they had to be thinking that far ahead. Even though I was focused on the moment and our needs and things that we needed to do for the moment. And so, either they would push me to kind of see things their way, or every single time they would, they were patient with me, which I think is another thing, that is a mark of a good producer, is a certain patience with your director and understanding. The same way that a director has to know how to really communicate differently with different cast members and crew members based upon their temperament, I think a good producer knows how to communicate with their director in such a way to get their director to see things their way. So it's all lessons in collaboration, I think, regardless of what your position is on set, your title is on set. It's all about learning how to collaborate with others healthily.
Yeah. And kind of as Dan said, like in finding and also being able to find a tribe, but also be able to let them be supportive of you. And I think like especially for me in terms of like Brad, Dee Dee, and Jeremy, my colleagues at Plan B, they were incredibly, when I wanted to make this movie, they were incredibly supportive, and they were like, what do you need? Let me give you the space to do it. We don't want to like micromanage, you got this. And they kind of just let me go and do it. And we're along the way, never questioning kind of like why I want to do it, getting micromanagey in that way. And, they're like my tribe that was incredibly supportive, along with me bringing a tribe of people that I'd worked with before, whether it's our composer Emil and our casting director Julie Kim and a bunch of others, and finding new tribe members. But I also think, as Leon and Shaka were kind of saying, as producers, I think, you know, we're meant to be leaders as well, and I think being as honest as you can be with your crew and the people you're working with and through the process is like incredibly important. I think a lot of people feel like as producers you have to hustle or like lie or cover things up or whatever, and I find that having witnessed that sometimes, just growing up, it never works out. um, and yeah, and kind of just, you know, being that person that people can rely on is, I think, it's a daunting position to be in, but one that's really important. And I think that's, it's as a leader, you, as you said, Shaka, like also need to understand you need to collaborate with people. You don't just get to the top by yourself, or you don't get to be at the top by yourself. And I think that's really important. And a lot of people think that accepting help or reaching out to somebody is like weak or, you know, diminishes your job, but it's actually, you know, you in collaboration can make beautiful, beautiful things.
Yeah, I think there's great, you know, I always think there's kind of great power in kind of knowing what you know, but knowing what you don't know, and, you know, never being afraid to ask questions, because, you know, you're learning every day. You know, it's rare that you'll kind of know everything, and yeah, like Shaka said, being collaborative.
And stay obsessed by the vision. I think also what I say is you can be in sometimes disagreement with the director because he's deep in it, he's deep in his shoot, and he's focusing on creative, and you have a bigger picture of things. And I think sometimes, yeah, you can say no and you can argue in a very healthy way, in a productive way, obviously. But I think it's the producer is obsessed by the vision and not in the service just of a director. And I think it's sometimes hard to make directors understand that we're not, you know, just in at their service, but again, service of the bigger picture. And keep an eye on this and always focus on that. And sometimes it has to go through no to the director, or let's talk about it, let's go through it, and why do you want to do this, and why I think it's not the right way to do this. And yeah, don't be a yes man, don't be a no man either.
Pick your spots.
Yeah, just be pragmatic. I think a producer has to be pragmatic and stay realistic at all time. It's not, you know, that's where we draw those lines sometimes that we have to draw.
Well, all this talk about the collective and collaboration, tribes, it's got me kind of hopeful for the coming months. I appreciate all of you dropping in today. I hope we can do this again sometime in person in different circumstances, but this has been great, and I appreciate your time. And congratulations on 8 great movies this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
That's been everybody. Take care. Have a good weekend.